All right, so we have our constructor set up. We have created our airdrop component, and now we need functionality, right? So what we need to do is we have to think about a timer, and a timer is not going to run on like 1,000 seconds per minute, hour. It needs to be converted, right? Like an hour is going to be 1 through 9, right? So it's based off of a clock system. So our minutes are going to be divided into 60, right? Our seconds are going to be divided into 60 as well. So we have to be thinking about it in terms of hours, seconds, and minutes. So what we want to do is create a function that can actually convert for us with JavaScript, remove the fractions, and create a clock system where we can have this timer set up so that our initialization, whatever we put in the state to say, well, we want it to start at 20 seconds or 30 seconds, 100 seconds, a million seconds, whatever that is, will convert into our clock parameters, right? Because we don't want to be doing these calculations every single time. That would be really annoying. So what we want to do is create a function, and we're going to call it set seconds. Actually, sorry, we're going to just call it seconds to time. And what is this function going to take as an argument? Well, we want to take the argument to be the seconds. So we'll just call it sex. And just sex is fine, just to keep it separate, but it's the same idea. And all right, so what variables do we want to add in here? Well, we're talking about hours, we're talking about minutes, and we're talking about seconds. So why don't we create 3 variables? So let's say let hours, seconds, minutes. All right, cool. And so now we have these. So let's create conversions. So let's create the mathematic conversions so that we can convert, let's say, 2,000 or 20,000 seconds for the hours. How many hours should 20,000 seconds equal, right? So how do we even convert this? What should be the calculation? Let's say you had 20,000 seconds. Is this 20,000? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 20,000. Wait, no, 20, 200, 2,000, 20,000, 200,000. Sorry, that's 200,000. Fine, there, 20,000. So we want to calculate 20,000 seconds equals how many hours? So how do you even do this calculation? Well, we take out the calculator because it's easier that way, right? Even though, do we really need the calculator? Yeah, we're going to use the calculator because this isn't a math class, but I could actually just do this mathematically. Anyway, so what we want to do is, it's a very basic calculation here. We have 20,000 seconds, and we want to divide 20,000 by what? Well, by 3,600, right? And if we make that division, we get 5.5 hours, or 5.555556 hours. Now, why do we do it by 3,600? Well, because we know that how many seconds are in a minute? Well, there's 60 seconds in a minute, right? And how many minutes are in an hour? Well, there's 60 minutes in an hour, right? So 60 times 60 is 360. What does that give us? Well, 3,600 is how many seconds there are, total amount of seconds multiplied by the total amount of minutes that we want to create for our clock system. That's how we get the 3,600. So this is our total in seconds. So everything that we divide in our seconds by this is going to actually issue out what it should be. Hey, I didn't make the clock system. This is just how it is. Okay, so knowing this calculation, let's go ahead and try to write this out mathematically. Let's try to write this out in JavaScript. So how would we do that? Well, we want to do the hours first, right? So what we do is we can set our hours. So we can say hours equals, and then just write out the calculation. So what we can say is well, we want the argument, so it's going to be sex, right? And we're going to want to divide sex by what? Well, we can just write 60 times 60. Okay, and this would be great. This would actually work perfectly if it wasn't for one very important thing. And what is that? And what is that one thing? Well, it's that if we do 20,000 seconds and we divide it by 3,600, we get this 5.555. We can't have that. So what we need to do is actually leverage a method. We can use a JavaScript rounding method. There's a couple different ones. And what we're going to use here is the floor. So to do that, what we can do is we can say hours equals math.floor. And we can wrap the calculation in our floor like this. So floor is going to round. So floor is effectively going to round our hours down. Okay, so it's just going to always round it down. So it returns the largest integer, essentially less than or equal to a given number. All right, and so that's the calculation for our hours. Great. Oh, you know what? Let me just switch this up. Let's do hours, minutes. It's going to look better. Seconds. So let's do our minutes next. And it's going to be a little bit more, slightly more complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a divisor for our minutes, right? And we're just going to say let divisor, I don't know how you spell divisor, divisor for minutes. And well, we're going to put in our secs, so the argument of however many seconds it is. And then we're going to use the modulo operator, so the remainder operator here. And we're going to run this calculation again. Now, what is the remainder operator in JavaScript? Well, essentially, the remainder operator it returns the remainder left over when one operand is divided by a second operand. And it always takes the sign of the dividend. So what does that mean? Well, essentially, okay, so if you have 12 and you want to find the remainder, and you want to find the remainder 5, well, 5 goes into 12 how many times? It goes into 12 2 times. So the expected output is going to be 2, right? Or minus 12, 5 goes into minus 12 how many times? It would be minus 2, right? How many times does 2 go into 4? 0 times. How many times does 2 go into negative 4? Minus 0. Okay, that's essentially what the remainder is going to do. It's going to find the remainder of our quotients. So why is this important for calculating for our clock? Well, so again, so if we have, let's say 20 seconds, all right, and we have 3,600 again for our calculation for total seconds to minutes. So if we divide 3,600 by 20 seconds, we get 180. Okay, and we still can't use 180 for our minutes, but if we take 180 and we divide this number by 60, we actually get 3 minutes. And the 3 minutes is essentially going to be the remainder for finding our minutes in 20,000 seconds. So let's go through that calculation one more time. Let's say we have 500 seconds. And so we want to do, how many times does 3,600 go into 500 seconds? So 7.2. So we get this 7.2 as our divisor for our minutes. And now when we take our 7.2 and we divide it into 60, we see that we have 0.12 minutes. And so that's just going to be 0, right? Because we're going to be rounding this. But that's essentially the calculation to find our minutes. Now, if that's a little bit confusing, no worries. We're going to write it out. We're going to write it out together now. So let's take a look and see this in action. So now that we have our divisor for minutes, what we can do is we can say minutes is going to equal our divisor for minutes, okay, divided by 60. But are we done here? Well, we're not done, right? Because we can't have fractions. If we have fractions, it's not going to work in JavaScript. So what do? Well, we're going to use the math.floor again. We're going to round. So we're going to be rounding. And there you go. That's how we get the minutes. So I want you to now pause the video and write out the code for the seconds. So go ahead, pause the video and give that a shot. All right. So hopefully you had some success figuring out the seconds. The seconds actually would be very similar to the minutes, right? Since we're using this same type of calculation. It's just going to be slightly different because instead of creating our divisor for minutes to be the seconds, the remainder of seconds to the overall total seconds of our clock system, what we're going to do is actually we're actually going to set a divisor for seconds we would take a divisor for seconds and set it to the divisor of minutes with a remainder of 60, to the remainder of 60. So it would actually look something like this, right? We would say let divisor for seconds, and let's paste that there. So let the divisor for seconds equal what? Well, we only need 60 seconds, right? We don't need to get minutes. We had to do 60 to 60, but since this is seconds, we only need 60. And instead of seconds, we should put the divisor for minutes to be the remainder of 60 here. And then now we would switch minutes to seconds, and we don't have to do any other division over here. The only thing and that's it. The only thing I would say to change is to use math.ceiling, and let's round up instead of rounding down for our seconds. So we'll be rounding it upwards. Okay, awesome. So now we have our hours, we've got our minutes, and we've got our seconds. But let's actually set these calculations into an object of properties in our function so that we can just return this object, and whenever we want to access the properties here, we can set it up to H, S, and M. Okay, so let's actually make an object. So we can just say let object equal object, and go ahead and try to do this yourself. Pause the video and set up your hours, minutes, and seconds to the properties, to the variables that we created as properties, hours, minutes, and seconds. So give that a shot. Okay, so hopefully you had some success with that. In order to do that, we're going to create 3 strings, and then we're going to be able to access these later on. So we're going to say H is going to be hours. We're going to say M is going to be minutes. And S is going to be seconds. Okay? And then when we're done, what's the final thing we want to do here in our function? Well, the final thing we want to do is actually return our object. So we just return the object. So this is our function to effectively convert our hours, minutes, and seconds, and then set up our state, so our time is going to receive our state of our hours and minutes and seconds. And we're going to do that together later on, so I'll show you how to do that. But for now, this has just been really a lesson in some JavaScript methods, setting up variables, writing an object, and then coming up with calculations based on a system, on a clock system. Now, if the whole remainder and calculations for divisor for minutes is confusing, don't worry. It's still confusing. Don't worry about it. It's a calculation. This type of calculation exists all over the internet. So it's the kind of thing that if you're really not sure about it, there's tons of modulo remainder calculators available. You could go on Khan Academy and learn about remainders if you need to brush up on your math, or brush up on your on your math and your probability and clocks, and that kind of stuff. So I'd encourage you to do that. But the real takeaway here is that we understand we're creating a function here which is going to be running our conversions to set up our clock, and then has the properties for our hours, minutes, and seconds, which we could then utilize for the airdrop timer. Okay, in the next video, we're going to continue to build out our airdrop timer. I'll see you there. Great work, great work, great work. See you in the next one.